The Hall of Union was a marvel of alien architecture, an enormous chamber whose domed ceiling shifted with the pulses of the local star. Gossamer light filtered through crystalline panels, bathing the assembly in hues of gold and violet. Thousands of delegates from across the galaxy occupied their appointed seats, elongated platforms hovering mid-air, transparent cocoons of bioluminescent membranes, and jagged metallic thrones that flickered with an inner current. At the center of it all stood a single human figure, her presence both bold and vulnerable beneath the towering forms of the more ancient species. Ambassador Genevieve Solomon squared her shoulders, gazing up at the members of the Galactic Council. She was the first human ever invited to speak here, a moment that had been decades in the making. Her path to this chamber had been paved with diplomatic wrangling, scientific advancements, and no small measure of controversy. Humanity's rapid expansion into the stars, its ability to adapt alien technologies, terraform hostile worlds, and navigate the most treacherous sectors of space, had drawn equal parts admiration and concern. Some council species had viewed humans as a welcome breath of fresh energy, a sign that even young races could find a seat among the galaxy's long-established powers. Others saw them as dangerous upstarts who moved too quickly, disrupted ancient trade routes, and unsettled carefully maintained balances of power. Many still whispered about the colony on Virus 3, where human settlers had clashed with the native Meskra over mining rights. The resulting skirmishes were a reminder to the galaxy of humanity's still raw ambition. And yet, here she was. Solomon had worked tirelessly to present a vision of humanity not as a threat, but as a partner. Her speech had been prepared and refined 100 times, every word chosen to convey respect, humility, and determination. The delegation from Earth occupied a modest alcove in the Grand Hall, with only a handful of advisors and a single holographic emitter to display humanity's achievements. The other species had arrived with retinues of dozens, sometimes hundreds, accompanied by shimmering biolinks and interactive displays of their technological grandeur. Genevieve knew the visual disparity would be noted, but she had chosen substance over spectacle. She took a deep breath and began. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Council," she said, her voice firm yet measured, "it is both an honor and a heavy responsibility to stand before you today. For centuries, humanity dreamed of reaching the stars. Now we find ourselves among you, sharing your skies, your challenges, and, if you will have us, your aspirations." There was a murmur from the assembly. The representatives of the Galactic hegemony, their serpentine bodies coiled in organic exosuits, tilted their eyeless heads. The insectoid Olith shrilled softly among themselves, their translucent wings flickering like lightning. The towering Arqueer, a crystalline species, emitted a low hum that rippled through the hall. Solomon ignored the noise, focusing instead on the faces or their equivalents that showed genuine interest. "Humanity is young, yes," Solomon continued, "but we are no strangers to adversity. We have survived our own wars, our own ecological crises, and the vast unknown of interstellar space. From these trials, we have learned resilience. We have also learned humility, though I understand that not all in this chamber may agree. I am here not to argue our perfection, but to present our willingness. We wish to join you, to learn from you, and to contribute to the shared destiny of the galaxy." Solomon's words were met with a mix of reactions. Some leaned forward, intrigued. Others exchanged skeptical glances. The council's presiding chair, a being known as Feline of the Miscarans, raised a chitinous limb. "Ambassador Solomon," Feline intoned, their voice clicking through the translation circuits, "you speak of resilience and humility, but these traits alone do not assuage concerns about humanity's rapid expansion. The Virus the 3 conflict remains a matter of deep concern. What assurances can you provide that humanity will not impose its will upon less advanced species? Solomon had anticipated this question. The events on Virus 3 are a painful chapter in our history, she said. I do not stand here to deny our mistakes. Rather, I stand here to show you how we have addressed them. The Earth Governance Alliance has implemented stringent protocols to prevent exploitation of indigenous populations. We have established interstellar courts to oversee disputes and ensure fair mediation. Most importantly, we have learned that strength comes not from domination, but from cooperation. There was a momentary hush, then more murmurs. Solomon felt a flicker of hope. She pressed on, presenting examples of peaceful human partnerships with alien species in neighboring systems. She highlighted technological exchanges that had benefited all parties, innovations that improved life expectancy, and restored failing ecosystems on distant worlds. It was not just words. She had data, testimonials, and concrete evidence to support her case. As Solomon spoke, she became aware of a growing tension on the far side of the hall. A delegation of tall, armored figures whispered among themselves. The Altern Protectorate, known for their strict adherence to council law and their suspicion of newer members, had made no effort to hide their disapproval of humanity's invitation. Their leader, Commander Vrylock, stood and raised his gauntleted hand. Enough of these platitudes, Vrylock declared. His voice carried the cold weight of authority. The truth is that humans are an unpredictable force. They expand without regard for the ancient treaties. They weaponize technologies faster than they can understand them. And now they seek to stand among us as equals? I say their presence here is not a step toward peace, but a prelude to chaos. Solomon's chest tightened, but she refused to let him rattle her. Commander Vrylock, she replied, her tone calm yet firm. Your concerns are not without merit. But I ask you, what better way to ensure our shared stability than to have humanity within this chamber, contributing to our mutual understanding? Isolating us only increases the chances of misunderstandings. Integration fosters transparency, and transparency, in turn, ensures accountability. Her words drew mixed reactions. Some nodded in agreement, while others remained silent, their expressions unreadable. Solomon felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She had given her best argument, and now it was up to the council to decide whether to extend humanity the full privileges of membership. But just as the assembly seemed ready to enter a formal debate, the chamber's lights dimmed. A ripple of unease spread through the delegates. A holographic image flickered to life in the center of the hall. A dark, cloaked figure, their face obscured, speaking in a heavily distorted voice. The human envoy's presence is a farce, the figure announced. The evidence we present will show that she comes not in peace but with the intent to sow discord. Look to your secured channels. The chamber erupted into confusion. Delegates frantically accessed their personal data interfaces, gasps and shouts echoing as they read the encrypted files. Solomon's team huddled around their own console, trying to determine the source of the intrusion. Before they could act, a security alert blared. Guards armed with energy lances entered the chamber. Ambassador Genevieve Solomon, the presiding chair declared, their voice uncharacteristically tense. You are hereby detained for questioning, on suspicion of espionage. Solomon's stomach dropped. What evidence? She demanded, her voice steady but tinged with incredulity. What charges? But the presiding chair offered no reply. The guards approached, their weapons raised. Solomon glanced at her team. Send the transmission, she instructed quietly. Get the message back to Earth. As she was led away, she saw the confused and concerned faces of the delegations. The footage of Ambassador Genevieve Solomon's execution reverberated across the solar system, a grim reminder that the stars, for all their wonder, were no sanctuary. Broadcast on every Earthside network, the grainy, unauthorized recording showed the ambassador's dignified defiance up to the final moment when her image was cut short by a crackling energy blade. The video was brief, the audio garbled, but the message was clear. The Galactic Council was no safe haven for humanity. Earth's orbital cities went silent as news stations aired the clip on endless loops. On Mars, mining teams gathered in mess halls, staring grimly at the holoscreens. Jovian trade stations paused their busy cargo hauls, workers murmuring darkly about betrayal and vengeance. Even on the farthest human outposts, where delays in lightspeed communication left colonies months behind the core systems, local leaders preemptively broadcast messages of unity and readiness. For a species that had long felt the sharp sting of isolation, this was the ultimate provocation. In the sleek chambers of the Earth Governance Alliance headquarters, the mood was as grim as the message. The EGA was humanity's central authority, formed to keep the newly scattered colonies united under a single vision. Its leadership council consisted of the most accomplished scientists, generals, diplomats, and economists Earth had to offer. Normally, their debates were filled with measured, deliberate discussions, weighed carefully to avoid unnecessary risk. But today was different. Chancellor Nevia Calder stood at the head of the chamber, her expression carved from stone. Her piercing, gray eyes swept over the gathered representatives. Holograms of the colony leaders hovered in a semicircle around the room, flickering faintly as they waited for her to speak. Calder's voice, when it came, was calm but resolute. The ambassador's death was not an act of war, it was an act of contempt. They treated her like a criminal, not an emissary. They showed the entire galaxy that humanity's word is meaningless to them. The council members murmured, some nodding in agreement, others wearing tight-lipped expressions. One of the holographic figures, Governor Katsuji Nair of Ganymede, leaned forward. Chancellor, I agree this is a grave insult, but we must tread carefully. We cannot match the Galactic Council's military might. Provoking them further could mean the end of us all. Provoking them further? Snapped Admiral Rowan Malik, head of the Terran Defense Armada. They killed our representative in cold blood. They've already declared their intent. We can't just sit here wringing our hands. A chorus of voices followed. Some called for restraint, others demanded immediate retaliation. Calder let them argue for a moment before raising her hand. The room fell silent. I understand the risks, she said, but I also understand that if we do nothing, we'll confirm every negative stereotype they have about us, that we're weak, indecisive, easily controlled. We must respond, and we must do so with strength. Admiral Malik's lips curled into a grim smile. Chancellor, you're saying what I've been waiting to hear. Let me prepare the fleet. But Calder shook her head. Not yet. This isn't about assembling a few warships and charging into battle. It's about showing the Council that humanity cannot be trifled with, that we have the means, the will, and the resolve to protect ourselves. Which brings me to a measure I hoped we would never need. A hush fell over the room. Even Malik's smirk faded as he realized what Calder was alluding to. The Annihilation Protocol, she said, her voice almost a whisper. The words landed like a thunderclap. It was an open secret within the EGA's upper ranks. Decades earlier, during the first tentative forays into deep space, Earth's leading military minds had conceived a contingency plan. The Annihilation Protocol wasn't about waging traditional war. It was a doomsday strategy. Hidden deep within, the asteroid belt stored in Black Ops facilities on barren moons, were weapons of unprecedented scale, artificial intelligence fleets programmed with no mission other than total destruction, quantum bombs that could collapse entire planets into singularities, devices so dangerous they were never intended to be used, only to exist as a shadowy threat. These weapons were overseen by a division so secret that even many within the EGA didn't know it existed. They were meant to be a last resort, a final statement that humanity, if pushed far enough, could not only fight back but obliterate its enemies entirely. Until now, the protocol was just that, a theoretical failsafe. Calder's words changed. That in an instant. The Annihilation Protocol is not an act of desperation, Calder continued. It is a statement. A reminder to the galaxy that we are not without recourse. If the Council wishes to treat us as outlaws, then let them understand what that means. You're prepared to destroy their entire homeworld? Asked Governor Nayar, his tone cautious. What will that make us? It will make us survivors, Calder replied. This isn't about starting a war. It's about ensuring our survival. I don't take this decision lightly. I know the costs, and I know the risks, but I will not allow humanity to become the galaxy's victim. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Malik, his voice steady, said, I'll have the Armada ready within the hour. Calder nodded. Do so. I want all fleets on alert. Prepare our first-line colonies for possible retaliation. But keep the protocol itself classified. The Council can know we have it, but not the extent. That's our bargaining chip. The Council adjourned, leaving Calder alone in the chamber. She stared at the flickering holograms where her advisors had once been. She had not lied when she said this decision weighed heavily on her. In her heart, she hoped the Council would see reason before it came to that. But in her mind, she knew they would not. Across human territory, the order was given. Ancient shipyards awoke from decades of slumber. Covert listening posts activated, their stealth modules flickering on and off like fireflies. Deep space drones unfurled from long-forgotten storage, their AI systems slowly booting up and recognizing only one directive. Execute the protocol. Earth's colonies, once isolated outposts scattered among the stars, were suddenly united in a single somber purpose. This wasn't the glorious exploration humanity had once dreamed of. It wasn't the peaceful coexistence they'd strived to achieve. It was survival. And survival now had a name. The Annihilation Protocol. The Galactic Council's chambers were a far cry from the orderly institution they had once been. The normally measured voices of the delegates were now sharp with recrimination, their discussions devolving into bitter accusations and frantic counter-arguments. The central forum, a vast circular room surrounded by tiers of floating platforms, shimmered with holographic displays of news feeds, intelligence reports, and grainy footage of humanity's escalating military activities. At the highest tier, the presiding chair Feline tried in vain to maintain order. The Miskaran delegate, whose species evolved in the cavernous depths of a high-gravity world, was used to a certain level of physical and political pressure. But this was chaos. Enough! Feline's voice, amplified by the chamber's acoustics, silenced the growing din. The thousands of representatives and their aides ceased their side conversations, all turning to the central podium where Feline stood. This council will conduct itself with dignity. The matter before us is not one we can resolve by shouting at each other. A long silence followed, broken only by the faint hum of the chamber's translation systems. The tension was palpable. Even the normally serene Arquir, a crystalline race that communicated in musical tones, now emitted a discordant hum. The me. Tarmasan representative, a broad insectoid figure with mandibles that clicked when he spoke, was the first to address the chamber. Feline, it is undeniable that this situation has spun out of control. The humans were always unpredictable, but their current response— he gestured toward a holographic image of human warships deploying in formation— is beyond what any of us anticipated. We must act decisively to prevent a full-scale conflict. A serpentine delegate from the Venkar Dominion coiled in agitation. Decisively? You mean send our fleets against them? That will only escalate the war they've already begun. We need a diplomatic solution before more of our outposts come under attack. A ripple of agreement followed from some of the more trade-dependent species, while others muttered bitterly. The Iridian Syndicate representative, a being encased in a living exosuit that pulsed faintly with blue light, raised a segmented arm. Diplomacy might have been possible before the humans declared their so-called Annihilation protocol. Do you not see what this means? They've activated contingency measures designed to wipe entire planets from existence. This is not a bluff, this is total war. At the mention of the Annihilation protocol, the chamber once again descended into uproar. Feline clenched their limbs against the polished dais, struggling to remain calm. It was true that the humans' announcement of the protocol had shaken the Council to its core. The very idea of weapons capable of destroying entire worlds was abhorrent to most of the galaxy's civilized species. It was a level of destruction not seen since the mythical wars that predated the Council's founding. But not everyone was horrified. Certain militaristic members, like the Alteran Protectorate, saw the humans' actions as both predictable and inevitable. Commander Vrylock, the Protectorate's grim-faced representative, spoke with a tone that was more satisfied than alarmed. You see now what I've been warning you all along, Vrylock said, his heavy armor clinking as he gestured. The humans are not a race of diplomats or explorers, they're conquerors. They expand, they take, and they threaten anyone who stands in their way. We should have removed them from the equation before they could grow this bold. Feline turned to him sharply. Remove them? You mean through violence, Commander? You know as well as I do that the Council's charter forbids preemptive military action against member candidates. If we had destroyed their ships, attacked their colonies, we would have been the aggressors. The responsibility for this escalation does not rest on our shoulders. Does it not? Another voice interrupted. It was the Olith representative, their delicate insect-like wings fluttering faintly as they spoke. I warned this council that inviting the humans to the table would end in disaster. They are not ready for this responsibility, and now they are proving it. By executing their envoy, we've given them every reason to strike back. Did we expect them to accept it quietly? This crisis is one of our own making. A soft buzz of agreement ran through some corners of the chamber. Feline exhaled slowly, their glowing eyes dimming in thought. They knew the council had mishandled the situation, especially when the evidence of internal sabotage began to surface. The leak had been a disaster in itself. A rogue faction within the council's intelligence network had released classified files to the wider assembly, showing that certain species, primarily the Alteran Protectorate and a small block of ultra-conservative allies, had fabricated evidence of human espionage. The claims used to justify the ambassador's execution had been manipulated, designed to force a reaction from humanity and perhaps drive them out of contention for full council membership. The revelation had shattered what little unity remained in the chamber. Once stable alliances were now brittle and contentious. The Alteran Protectorate denied the accusations, but the evidence was damning. Delegates who had once supported the Protectorate's hardline stance against humanity now distanced themselves, fearful of being implicated in the conspiracy. Meanwhile, moderate factions pushed for an immediate formal apology and reparations to Earth. Though how to deliver such an apology while humanity's fleets prowled the Council's trade routes was a question no one could yet answer. Feline addressed the assembly again, their tone calm but firm. The truth is undeniable. Elements within this council sought to provoke humanity, and their actions have brought us to the brink of war. We must consider our response carefully. Not with bluster, not with further violence, but with an honest reckoning of our mistakes. The only path forward is to admit our culpability and attempt to rebuild trust. Rebuild trust? Frylock snapped. With a species that has made annihilation a central tenet of its strategy? Do you think they will accept an apology when they are already deploying weapons that could destroy us all? You are deluded, Feline. The presiding chair met his words with silence, then turned to the rest of the chamber. If we are to survive this crisis, Feline said, we must act not as divided nations but as a unified body. That is why this council was created. If we let this moment destroy us, we might never recover. I urge you all to consider this carefully. The humans are not our enemies by nature, and they are not beyond reason. But first, we must prove that we ourselves are still capable of reason. The chamber settled into a tense quiet. Delegates looked to one another, weighing their next moves. The council was fractured, its authority weakened, its once unshakable stability now precarious at best. But Feline's words left an impression, if only a faint one. A call to unity in a time of discord. A faint hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the galaxy's oldest institution could weather this storm. As the session adjourned, Feline lingered in the empty chamber, staring up at the domed ceiling that had witnessed millennia of debate and compromise. Somewhere out there, the humans were gathering their strength, preparing for a fight the council might not survive. Feline could only hope the council, in the void between stars, where silence reigns and light takes centuries to travel, humanity's vengeance unfolded with deadly precision. Fleets of warships, sleek, angular constructs of dark alloys, slipped out of shadowed asteroid belts and dormant shipyards. Equipped with adaptive stealth fields and weaponry once considered theoretical, these ships began striking council outposts along the trade corridors, leaving nothing but debris and chaos in their wake. The first target was a remote logistics station on the edge of the Denarian Nebula. Council sensors barely registered the incoming vessels before plasma lances melted through the station's core. By the time the nearby patrol fleet responded, the human ships had already vanished, leaving behind only crippled hulls and a single encoded message: "Do not underestimate us again." From there, the assaults multiplied. Supply routes were ambushed, communication relays dismantled, and isolated patrols obliterated. The Council's once unassailable trade networks began to fray at the edges. Refugee ships from border colonies poured into more central systems, spreading tales of human attacks that came like lightning from the dark. Some whispered of ghost fleets, others of weapons that bent space itself. The humans' use of experimental technology, developed in secret and enhanced by their relentless ingenuity, gave them a mobility and unpredictability that baffled the Council's defense analysts. In truth, humanity was leveraging everything it had. The Annihilation Protocol had unleashed not just weapons but a mindset, a willingness to act decisively, to exploit the galaxy's assumptions about them. Earth Central Command coordinated from hidden bastions deep within the Kuiper Belt, while frontline admirals communicated through quantum entanglement links that no Council interceptor could trace. Their ships, smaller and faster than the Council's heavy dreadnoughts, turned hit-and-run tactics into a form of strategic art. For the Council, this was a nightmare realized. Its military, while vast and technologically advanced, had never faced an opponent quite like this. Most council conflicts in recent centuries had been small-scale skirmishes, territorial disputes, trade disagreements, or the occasional rogue pirate armada. The humans were different. They weren't raiders or insurgents. They were a unified force wielding both advanced technology and a deep-seated determination born of survival. The Tarmesan defense minister, a prominent voice within the council's military committee, found herself briefing increasingly frustrated delegates on a daily basis. "They don't fight like us," she said, her mandibles clicking sharply. "They don't engage us head-on. They strike and disappear. They target infrastructure, not territory. They aren't trying to hold ground, they're trying to dismantle our ability to fight back." A holographic map displayed the extent of the damage. Dozens of systems had suffered attacks, not all of them total losses, but enough to destabilize local economies and sow fear. The council members who had once called for a measured response were now under immense pressure from their homeworlds to do something, anything, to stop the bleeding. But every move the council made seemed to play into humanity's hands. When they fortified a supply station, the humans attacked a shipyard instead. When they diverted fleets to protect their trade hubs, the humans struck at relay beacons and reconnaissance outposts. The Council's heavy warships were powerful, yes, but slow, built for overwhelming force rather than the kind of asymmetric warfare humanity was now perfecting. The crisis extended beyond military losses. The galaxy's intricate web of alliances and trade agreements began to unravel. The refugee crisis swelled as colonies on the outskirts fled to safer core systems, straining resources. Council member species that had remained neutral were forced to choose sides, and many began to reconsider their loyalty. The humans' boldness, their refusal to submit, made them an almost mythic enemy in the eyes of some. Entire species who had once looked down on humanity now saw them as a formidable power, reckless and destructive perhaps, but undeniably resourceful and determined. Yet the humans' strategy was not without its cost. Their colonies, stretched thin, had to constantly shift resources from development to war production. Civilian freighters were repurposed into military transports. Entire research divisions turned from exploration to weaponry. It was a total mobilization, one that left humanity vulnerable in its own way. Every ship lost, every supply line disrupted by a council counterattack, strained their efforts to maintain their momentum. But for now, their bold strikes were holding the council at bay. By the end of the first campaign year, the council's control over its outer territories had weakened significantly. Delegates who had once mocked humanity now spoke of them with a begrudging respect, and increasingly fear. The question was no longer whether the humans could be contained, but Alastra Station hovered at the very edge of the nebula's emerald glow, a once thriving trade hub that now served as a crowded haven for refugees fleeing the widening war. Every docking bay overflowed with vessels of every conceivable design. Oblong freighters, sleek courier ships, battered colony barges. The station's central promenade, a vast, spiraling corridor lined with shops and kiosks, was now a makeshift camp. Tents, jury-rigged shelters, and clusters of people, both human and alien, filled every available space. Dr. Alara Koji, a scientist, known more for her innovative subspace communication theories than for war or politics, sat quietly in a corner of a repurposed lounge. Around her were a dozen scattered datapads, each displaying fragments of intercepted council communiques, intelligence reports, and fragments of the message that had preceded Ambassador Solomon's death. Koji's short black hair was tied back, in a loose knot, her face pale but focused. A small group of human volunteers and alien sympathizers gathered around her. Among them was Malik, a retired miner from one of the outer colonies, and Rilo, a tall, willowy Nissel whose own people had suffered under the Council's heavy-handed trade policies. They, like Koji, wanted answers, and perhaps a chance to Stop the war's deadly spiral. Koji's voice was steady, though exhaustion lingered at the edges. It's all here, she said, pointing to the series of linked documents on her datapad. The altered evidence, the falsified security feeds. The council didn't just condemn Ambassador Solomon on a whim. They were fed lies by their own people. Rilo tilted her head, her luminous green eyes narrowing. You've been saying that for weeks, Koji. But proving it to a few refugees here on Alistra doesn't mean the galaxy will listen. What good is the truth if no one hears it? Koji exhaled slowly. That's why we need the beacon. Malik frowned. The beacon? I thought that was just a theoretical paper you wrote years ago. It was theoretical, Koji replied. Until now. I've been working on the prototypes in my free time, little more than a side project. But the principle is sound. We can broadcast a signal on a subspace frequency the council can't jam. If we reach the right networks, if we send this data to systems that are still undecided, they'll see the truth. Rilo leaned forward. You really think one transmission will make a difference? The council's propaganda machine is massive. They'll discredit the message before it finishes. Broadcasting. It won't just be one message, Koji said. Her eyes flicked back to the datapad, as if drawing strength from the evidence she had uncovered. We can piggyback the signal across hundreds of relay points. Once it's out, it'll replicate itself through every system that picks it up. They can't silence all of them. The small group exchanged doubtful glances, but Koji's determination was contagious. Malik finally broke the silence. Even if you're right, how do we power it? Alistra's infrastructure is hanging by a thread, and half the generators here are running on patched-up fusion cores. Koji tapped a schematic on her datapad. We don't need Alistra's grid. There's an abandoned council relay station in the nebula, Sector 47B. It's been offline for decades, but the core systems should still be intact. With some repairs, it'll have enough power to sustain the beacon until the signal goes out. Sector 47B? Rilo said, her voice skeptical. That's deep inside council-controlled space. You'll need a stealth ship just to get close, let alone the equipment to repair a relay. We'll get what we need, Koji said, her tone firm. If the council learns the truth, if they realize their own leaders engineered this war to serve their interests, they might splinter. Even if it doesn't stop the fighting, it could give us leverage. And if they just come after us harder? Malik asked. What then? Then we'll know we did everything we could to break this cycle, Koji replied. I don't have all the answers, but I know this. Sitting here and watching the galaxy tear itself apart isn't an option. If we succeed, if even a handful of delegates see the truth, we'll have made a difference. The room fell silent again. The refugees milling about the promenade continued their restless movements, their voices a distant hum. Koji stared at her datapad, tracing the edges of the schematic with her finger. Finally, Rilo nodded. I'll help. It's risky, but if there's even a chance to stop this war, it's worth it. Malik sighed, running a hand over his bearded chin. I can find the parts. Don't know where we'll get a stealth ship, though. I know someone, Koji said. A smuggler who owes me a favor. If we can reach the relay station, I'll handle the rest. The small group began to plan in earnest. While the war raged on in distant sectors, while fleets clashed and planets burned, they prepared for a different kind of mission. A mission not of destruction, but of revelation. Dr. Ilara Koji's beacon wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a fleet or a bomb. But it was a chance. A slim hope that somewhere above the council capital planet of Kilvaris, the once placid skies were now a chaotic sea of battleships. Human fleets, shadowy and precise, darted through council formations like wolves among a flock of startled prey. Planetary defense platforms lit up the darkness, streaks of energy lancing toward the human vessels. Explosions rippled across the orbital bands, the debris of shattered hulls spiraling down toward the atmosphere. Below, the council chamber was in uproar. Delegates shouted over one another, a cacophony of blame and fear. Even Feline, the Miskaran, presiding chair who had weathered countless crises, struggled to maintain control. "The humans are on our doorstep," roared the Altaran representative, Commander Vrylok, his armored fists slamming the dais. "We must activate the Trigalian Protocol, deploy the purge fleets, end them now before they annihilate us all." "No," countered the crystalline Arqueer, delegate, her voice a melodic but stern tone. "Our fleets are already in disarray. Deploying the protocol would not only devastate human territory, it would trigger every neutral system in the galaxy to turn against us. We would lose any hope of future stability." The insectoid Olith representative, their translucent wings vibrating anxiously, chimed in. "We must consider the civilian cost. Billions of lives, both human and our own, are at stake. Surely there must be another way." As the delegates bickered, a faint chime sounded, an incoming signal. Feline, desperate for any semblance of order, activated it. A hologram shimmered into existence in the center of the chamber. It was not from a council source. It was not from the humans. It was from a single, daring individual. Dr. Alara Koji's face appeared, her expression tired but resolute. She stood. In the control room of the ancient relay station she had salvaged deep in the Denarian Nebula. Behind her, the faint hum of an active subspace transmitter resonated. Her words cut through the chaos of the chamber. "Esteemed council members," she began, her voice carrying both urgency and determination. "I am Dr. Alara Koji, speaking not as a soldier or diplomat, but as a scientist who has uncovered the truth. The war you now face did not begin with humanity's arrogance nor with the Council's response. It began with lies." The chamber fell silent. Even Vrylok's growl was stilled. The delegates leaned forward, their various forms tense and still, as they listened. "The death of Ambassador Solomon," Koji continued, "was orchestrated by factions within this very council. They falsified evidence. They manipulated your votes. They ensured her execution not because of her guilt but because of her innocence. I have the proof." She gestured, and her broadcast shifted to display data streams, intercepted communications, and surveillance logs. They showed clear patterns of manipulation, fabricated documents, doctored surveillance footage, orders signed by individuals who were now either conspicuously absent or vehemently denying involvement. It laid bare a conspiracy designed to ignite a conflict before humanity could solidify its position as an equal player in galactic affairs. "This is the reason my people fight," Koji said. "Not because we want war, but because war was forced upon us. If you have any regard for the principles this council was founded upon, you must stop this now. Expose the conspirators, hold them accountable, and seek peace before it's too late." Her message ended, and the hologram flickered out. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then the delegates erupted. But this time the tenor was different. Voices called for investigations, for the suspension of certain officials, for transparency. A few even demanded immediate ceasefires. The truth Koji had sent into the galaxy rippled through the council's ranks, sowing doubt and forcing a pause in the relentless drive toward total war. Meanwhile, in orbit, the human fleet was preparing its final strike. Admiral Rowan Malik stood aboard the bridge of the Eclipse, Earth's flagship. The Council's defensive formations were weakening. The path to Silveris's surface was opening, and with it, the possibility of ending the Council's leadership in one decisive blow. But Malik hesitated. A voice crackled through the comms, a direct message from Earth Central Command. Chancellor Nevaeh Calder appeared, her face drawn but composed. Admiral Malik, Dr. Koji's transmission has gone live. Reports from our intelligence network indicate fractures within the Council's alliance. Some are calling for a ceasefire. Some are turning against the conspirators who started this war. If we hold our fire, we may achieve more than we ever could by destroying their planet. Malik's officers exchanged uneasy glances. They had come so far, sacrificed so much, and now they were being told to wait. Do we trust them, Chancellor? Malik asked after a pause. They've lied before. We don't trust their words, Calder replied. We trust the fracture. If the Council divides against itself, we gain the leverage we need to negotiate from strength, not desperation. Give them this chance. Hold the fleet in position, but do not strike unless they attack first. Reluctantly, Malik issued the order. The human fleet held its fire. The Council's forces, battered and confused, made no move to escalate. On Silvaris, the revelation of the conspiracy led to a rapid series of events. Arrests of key Council leaders, declarations of neutrality from several member species, and a growing call for peace talks. The war did not end overnight. Skirmishes continued in remote sectors. Distrust lingered. But the tide had shifted. Dr. Koji's beacon had pierced the fog of war with a single, undeniable truth, and that truth set a new course for the galaxy. Humanity's place among the stars was no longer a question of if, but how, and at what cost. In the end, both sides paid a heavy price. Worlds lay in ruins, billions mourned their dead. But from the ashes, a fragile hope emerged. The Council began its slow transformation, rebuilding on a foundation that acknowledged humanity, not as an outsider, but as a peer. And Earth, though, scarred by the conflict, emerged as a force no longer underestimated. The galaxy had changed. Peace was no longer a given, but a choice, a costly, fragile choice. And for now, it was a choice they were all willing to make.